It's the most wonderful time of the year, listeners, which is that time of year when Pop Screen likes to look at a film starring someone who's had a substantial Christmas hit. If we were a bit more prescient this year, we'd have done one with Shane McGowan, who we have covered on this podcast before, but alas, I am here talking about Mariah Carey in Glitter. Who am I? I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a writer for the Geek Show and Byline Times and a short filmmaker. And I'm joined this week by
David O'Hare, also a writer for the Geek Show, and now a complete and total Mariah Carey lamb.
is that the fandom name for Mariah
That
Carey?
is the fandom name. Lambs, her lambs. I'm not sure why, but there we go.
Maybe I should have done a bit more research on this, but I think you can probably cover my deficiencies.
I've got you covered. Don't worry.
Have you seen this film before?
You know what? When watching it, I unlocked a very deep buried memory of seeing this film before. And yeah, definitely. Do you know what actually unlocked the memory was Max Beasley, who is someone who I haven't seen in quite a long time, and remember very well from that era. So yeah, I have seen it before, but as I say, I think it was a repressed memory.
Well, there was a lot of trauma going around the time because this was a film whose box office prospects were famously spiked by Osama bin Laden.
Absolutely. Released, I believe, literally on September the 11th.
I think Mariah Carey has said this in the past. It's not quite accurate. The soundtrack album was released on September the 11th, 2001. The film itself was released on the Friday after, which is still not a time when many people were looking for a good, fun kind of pop music melodrama, to be honest.
Yeah, we were still reeling as the world. And I don't think many people were keen to go and watch a Rags to Riches, A Star Is Born knockoff set in New York City. I did actually the whole time keep a little eye out for the Twin Towers in the back, in the many shots of New York that permeate the film. And I did see them, I think more than once. And yeah, so it was poignant reminder of era of a simpler time, perhaps.
Yes, you mentioned The Star Is Born, which I'm really glad you said, because it strikes me that for much of the late 20th century, there were two basic kinds of pop movie. There was the Hard Day's Night model, where you've got a band who get into wacky misadventures, and they're playing themselves, and then there's the Star Is Born model, which is a more sort of earnest, melodramatic pop movie where the singer plays a version of themselves in a kind of Romana clef about their rise to success. And it's the latter one that kind of, despite this, that kind of survived 9/11 in that a year afterwards, you had 8 Mile, which is basically Star Is Born, but he raps. Had obviously a remake of A Star Is Born that did extremely well recently. The Hard Day's Night model, I think, was killed stone dead by Spice World. No one's ever going to make that.
Well, no, it just can't be topped, is what you mean by Spice World.
But yeah, this hits every beat of the Star Is Born model, I think.
You're right. I mean, it's difficult to. I mean, I've read up about the film. I've read things around it. I mean, Mariah seems to move from "this is about me" to "this is a fictional story" I wrote this, I didn't write this. There's a lot of mystery swirling around this movie. And but yeah, in terms of A Star Is Born, you can absolutely, as soon as you sort of put those two together, it makes complete sense, and you can track the film very well from that point. I suppose the only thing that sort of changes slightly is in terms of dice, Max Beasley's dice.
Right.
He
Yeah.
sort of doesn't descend. He descends into anger as opposed to
Mm.
any kind of vices,
Addiction.
drugs, or alcohol or addiction. Yeah, they. I mean, the whole time they may as well have been drinking like squash.
Yeah.
I didn't see any scenes with. There was one drunk acting scene, I think, and the rest of it was just yeah, club, 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 but no alcohol, no nothing. So it was quite squeaky. It was like a sort of sanitized version, I thought,
Oh,
of
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the one sort of hint of malfeasance we get, and it's one that sort of chimes with the idea that this is Romana Clef about Mariah Carey, is that there is this repeated motif of women dating people who have power in the record industry,
yeah.
which is obviously kind of a reflection of the kind of whispers that surrounded her in her early career. 'Cause she was dating Tommy Mottola, the CEO of Sony.
Hmm.
And it's like,
Absolutely.
I'm sure that gave her a bit of a leg up, but it seems a bit mad to say, "Oh, Mariah Carey would never have got anywhere in the music industry without." Like, I'm not a fan, but she can sing. That's pretty universally agreed.
There is no doubt. There is no doubt. And the singing in this film, in and outside of the film, her singing is very, very good,
Yeah.
exceptional. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's funny, isn't it? The crossover. I mean,
Mm.
at the start, it was sort of like men and their Barbies walking around for a good sort of 25 minutes at the start of the film. You had this sort of evil promoter guy, evil producer guy who had her as a background singer. You had Dice himself walking around with her, and it was sort of like very much like dress them up slutty, get them into a club, hand around cassettes. I mean, it was the 1980s, so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of thing. We'll come to why it was the 1980s. I think I have a theory. Otherwise,
Okay.
there's absolutely no reason why this film is in the 1980s. No, absolutely none. It doesn't serve a purpose as far as I can see, other than nobody has a cell phone or a mobile phone.
Yeah,
Uh, it's an odd place to put it, I think, because it could have been the 90s.
it could. And I think putting it in the 1980s also opens up a slight problem that I spent more time thinking about than any normal person
We're
should.
supposed to.
Because I have a fan theory about this movie, which is that it is set in a parallel universe where the 80s comedian Andrew Dice Clay never existed.
Yes, yes, that's probably about right. I'm up for that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fine.
I wouldn't object to that. But all the time with Dice, the Max Beasley character, people are calling him, "Hey, the Dice Man," and it's like, this is New York in the 80s. There's no one gonna say, "Guy, I think someone else in show business has taken that nickname," but other than
As
you.
No, because he's the most popular DJ in all the clubs, despite the fact that he seems to do one or two songs, walk through the audience, and then like in one club. I mean, there's other DJs that you see as well. There's a couple of them in and out the film. He has a beautiful apartment though. They
Yeah,
fall into the trap of that sort of you know whether it's 80s or 90s New York. I don't know how much money he earns. I assume he makes a good living from DJing, but beautiful apartment,
yes,
just like
yeah.
everybody else in the 80s and 90s in New York.
That feels like a very anachronistic thing, of course, because this was released in 2001, as we've said, which is a time when to be a DJ was to get a really good income from the super clubs, from Ibiza and places like that.
Yeah.
Uh, in 80s New York, yeah, not convinced that a DJ could afford that apartment.
No, me neither. I mean, this is sort of the era. Because what were we? 83, I
Something
think, was the
like
sort of
that,
last
yeah.
date that we saw. And this is the sort of early Madonna era. And
Mm,
so you're sort of like, it was very, even the music was firmly, early 2000s R&B, as far as I
yeah.
can tell. There was a sort of nod to a bit of, in the one song that she seemed to have released in the movie, the character of Billie released one song, as far as I can see, but sold out Madison Square Gardens. which was "I Didn't Mean to Turn You On." And as
Yes.
far as the song, it was about 2 minutes, and it was the phrase that had been turning on about 5 times. But listen, not dissing it. It was a great sort of what we thought 80s songs were like in 2001. So that's
Yeah.
fine. But certainly all the rest of them, as well as being on the nose for the storyline, which again I'm not complaining. Uh, we're firmly early 2000s R&B, as far as I could tell. Late 90s, early 2000s R&B.
Which is really weird because the soundtrack is produced in part by Jam and Lewis, who defined that kind of 80s R&B sound with their work for Janet Jackson.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
even bringing them on board could not quite dispel the idea that this is a turn of the millennium pop star doing stuff influenced by the 80s rather than the 80s.
Maybe it's just that her voice is so synonymous with that time,
Yeah,
um,
maybe.
because it is unique. And
Mm.
there's an interesting story about the actual lead, I guess, track from the movie, which is Loverboy.
Mm.
Um, Personal favorite, love it. Wasn't aware that a completely different sample was used originally.
Oh,
And here we get to my theory that they set this film in the 80s because they were originally now the sample that they used for Loverboy is Candy by Cameo.
right.
And so therefore that's a very 80s song. Fine.
Mm.
But originally, and I'm just gonna read this out because I'd never heard this one, they wanted to use a sample of Yellow Magic Orchestra's 1978 electronic jam Firecracker. Now
Right.
if you go on the internet, Mariah has since released on YouTube that version,
Mm.
and it's exactly the same song, just with a different sample underneath. And so it's an odd to listen to it now because it's quite sort of but it's the same tune, same everything, just a different sample and a completely different song. Rumors are Tommy Mottola got wind of the fact that she was using that sample, and following their very acrimonious split, which was very recent,
Mm.
stole the sample out from under them and gave it to J-Lo instead. So she
Ah,
released a single with Ja Rule, "I'm Real," using that sample, meaning that Mariah just it would look ridiculous if Mariah used the same. It was very heavily used in both songs, and
yeah.
so she had to find another sample song to use, and yeah, that's I think explains not only why I think that song's great. If you didn't know that, that's not a problem. But I think that explains why the film is in 1983 because they're
Yeah.
going, okay, here's a 78 song. We're gonna have to. It's a couple of years later. We're gonna sing over it. People will still know it's in this, and I think that's why because I can't think of any other explanation. But that
So
was a bit of
what
a revelation for me. I'd never heard of that before. I
same.
never knew it was a different version. So
So
interesting.
what you're positing here is that before they used the Cameo sample, there would have been a script for Glitter that was set in '78 where Mariah Carey's like performing at CBGB's with Iggy Pop or
Yes,
something.
obviously. Well, yeah, I guess, or at least that explains its like sort of early 80s
Yeah.
setting in that it's like a little bit closer to 78 than if we were way in the 90s and this random sample pops up from nowhere.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just think this is. I mean, it's weird to think that a movie is completely based around a sample of a song that they've used in the soundtrack, and even that Loverboy song isn't even used that much. Um, we hear other songs a little bit more, I think, but I think it's the one that sort of in the catalog of Mariah is probably the most famous that is featured in the film.
Yeah, I would
So yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really interesting, and we'll talk about it, but I think that divorce from Tommy Mottola, and the long forgotten but again remembered feud with J Lo
Mm.
does play into a lot of what happened to Glitter.
Well, that is the most sort of. Uh, I think if you're not a Mariah Carey fan, there's probably like two things you know about her that are in the pop cultural memory. One of them is "All I Want for Christmas Is You," and one
Yeah,
of them is "I Don't Know Her."
yeah, yes, I know. I don't know her. It's the best. Yeah, and there was a couple of others for me. There is a couple of other famous sort of. There's an interview she did once where a publicist pulled her away I think
Really?
she was saying
Like,
that, yeah,
was it
she
with a comedy vaudeville stage show?
like a hook on the neck. No, it was literally she was sort of talking to an interviewer, and I think it was very off the cuff, and she sort of said, they said I'm obviously asked about, I think it was the feud with JLo, and she said, "Oh, I'm just trying to spread light and peace and fun around the world." And the publicist, much like the publicist in Glitter probably would have done, yanked her away from the camera, and she's sort of shouting back, going, and you can see her going, "All I was going to say was that I just wanted to spread sweetness," and it's very sort of like her life became this strange whirlwind.
Mm.
Um, and I think that played into a lot of what throughout the early 2000s, and I think that's probably what played into a lot of what happened to Glitter.
Yes, because I mean, we'll just sort of get the slightly sort of darker bit of this out of the way because I do think that whereas there is probably no parallel universe where Glitter was a runaway hit, I do think a lot of the negative reaction to it was more vicious and more gleeful because of that peculiarly 2000s thing of let's goad the woman who's obviously having a bit of a breakdown as
Yeah.
she was around this time. I mean, I
Mhm.
must say that the big anecdote that gets told about this is that she appeared on TRL where she walked on wearing a oversized men's shirt, pushing an ice cream cart and handing ice creams to the audience while singing Loverboy, which honestly sounds pretty great to me, actually. I
Yeah.
think that's that, yeah.
That's good to me.
Yeah. But she did have a lot of mental health troubles around this time, and it does feel, looking back, like a rehearsal for the even worse, more sort of regretted tabloid feeding frenzies over Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan and Amy Winehouse that sort of marred the rest of that awful cultural wasteland of a decade.
Yeah, I really agree. I think this was the very start of tabloid culture really
Mm,
taking people down. I mean, Mariah had sort of risen quite nicely, steadily, to
mm,
where she was. Fantasy was huge. That was 1995, 96 ish. And so she was already established as a sort of big star. Now, it wasn't unusual for, big singing star, I should say. It wasn't unusual for, those kind of stars to make a jump to films. I mean,
yeah,
Whitney and The
absolutely.
Bodyguard had done it, and
Yeah,
that certainly it was no people liked their music, they wanted to see them in film. So by all on paper, this is and obviously we're sort of back into that with Lady Gaga again in The Star Is Born. So on
yeah,
paper, this is a success. There's no reason to think it wouldn't be. But I think that feeding frenzy, as you say, and we talked about Britney Spears and Crossroads actually a little while ago. Do you remember?
we did.
Uh, it's
Yeah,
it's up on Patreon, I believe, if anybody wants to see it.
yes.
Just plug that one. But yeah, so I think that you're right. I mean, it's like watching it play out again, and I
Mm,
think it was sort of very much like, let's take them down. If they're showing any kind of weakness, let's take them down.
yeah.
And there are parts of this film I wouldn't call it a complete weakness. I wouldn't say that it's completely without merit. Let's just say that.
Mm,
I believe that the Razzie judges disagree with me, but I we'll talk about that in a bit. But there is something to it. But I think that given that it's not, a runaway critical hit, I think it was just easy fodder to just go, this is just pants, and
totally. Yeah.
Mariah's let's whereas before it was probably a bit, there was already rumors about the feud with J Lo and obviously
Mm.
the divorce. God forbid a young woman leaves her, incredibly successful older record producer
Well,
husband.
and also because there is still this sort of narrative that oh, Mariah Carey, she got famous by dating the head of the record label, as though in the divorce, Tommy Mottola is going to go, all right, I'm taking your singing voice.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
just going to
Any
sound
success
tone
you've
deaf.
had is
Yeah,
completely on my merit. Yeah, it's odd, and I think I've read a few little bits about how vindictive he was,
mm,
and just that was a really difficult, divorce for her. I think I remember in the news as well. It was big news at the time. I think that they had split up, but I remember thinking it was a bit of a mismatch anyway. He was a lot older, and she was her. So yeah, I mean, acrimonious divorce, lots of things stacking up that people could just start to take her down. And I think following this, then she had other issues as well, mental health issues. She was dropped again, wasn't she, by Virgin? After this,
Right.
Virgin had signed her up for this, and then they released the album. And I believe they got out of her contract quite quickly, paid her off to go. So she found herself sort of without a record contract, single, film flopped, and exhausted probably.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think yeah, we'd see this play out again very very clearly with Britney. A couple of years later, 6 or 7 years later.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely, yeah.
but they'd already had a practice run, definitely with Mariah. She was front page of the worst kind of tabloids for a good couple of
Yeah.
years after this.
I mean, while we're talking about that sort of gossip about her early career, we should talk about the other sort of power couple that are in this movie, because we've talked about Billie, the Mariah Carey character. It's telling that this is the first time we've actually used the character's name, isn't it?
Billy, Billy
Yeah, that
Frank.
means something. Yeah, we've talked about Billie and Dice. The the other couple, played by Terrence Howard and Padma Lakshmi, which I realise is only the second most incongruous couple Padma Lakshmi's been part of, but it is really weird, isn't it?
It is weird. It is weird. I couldn't, for the first start of it. I was like, I couldn't really work it out.
Mm,
Um, but like I said, it was men with their Barbies. They sort of walked around like parading these women around,
yeah,
um, these gorgeous girls. And then, Billy becomes exactly the same on Dice's arm,
yeah.
parading around the clubs. But the difference is she can sing, obviously, and Pearl Padma, who, good for her, self-deprecating. She could sing a note.
I think she's having fun. She is having a lot
I
of
think
fun in that
she
role.
gets it.
Yeah,
She gets it.
yeah,
And Terrence Howard, for me, one of the highlights. To be honest, I thought he lit up the screen every
yeah.
time he came on. I thought he was quite good. I
Not
believed
expecting him at
his
all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I believed his character.
Mm,
And I thought he was, especially with Mariah. I think there's a scene where he sort of confronts her in Dice's apartment towards the end, and I noticed that he was the only one really that sort of came up to her and did that, because I think
yeah,
everybody, throughout the film, it's a little bit like she's a bit urethral. She's sort of a
yeah.
little bit out of it, even when she's sort of being intimate with Dice.
Mm, yeah.
Max Beasley, casting person, what were you thinking? It just does not look right in any way, shape, or form for me.
I do not. I have heard nothing at all about Max Beasley as a person. He may be lovely for all I know, but his presence here screams we were turned down by a lot of actors.
Yeah, I agree, and also I think the fact that he is like a musician himself, which
Yeah.
he was showcased extensively.
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
tinkling on the piano, he's playing the drums, he's
Yeah.
just going for any time there's an instrument, he's just like, I will play this, and I will look at my face playing this. Look, that's me. And he's a session musician, and he obviously, what that was a plus that they could showcase, that didn't have to like put people's fingers in and do
Yeah.
that kind of usual shot. But I think they sort of really, so, and I mean, at the time he was quite big. I think at the time he was dating one of the Spice Girls, or he
Was it
was anyway
Mel
for a
B?
while.
Yeah, I was thinking, was that
Mel
a
B.
weird kind of false memory I've had? But no, he was dating Mel B, wasn't he?
He was, and I have to pull my hands up. But when I saw him, I thought, "Oh God, what a throwback!" I haven't seen
Yeah.
him. Now listen, he has worked. I googled him. He has not stopped working. He's a successful actor.
Good
He
for
is in a
him.
lot of stuff. I know, but how horrible of me. I only remember that version of him, and
Yeah.
I didn't realize that he is constantly, his filmography is long. He was just recently in Hijack on was Apple, was it, or something? Hijack was on Amazon. Anyway, yeah, he's a worker. He's
Yeah.
had a very successful career, and I think that, yeah, it's strange that I sort of thought, oh, I haven't seen him in a really long time, and actually there he's been the whole time on my screen in lots of successful stuff. So hasn't done
Yeah.
his career any harm, is what I'm trying to say.
Not at all, no. I think the one moment in this when he's not particularly, I mean, he gets some of the most unpronounceable dialogue, which I'm sure we'll get to, but the one moment in this where I thought, oh, you could have done that better. And it's strange because, as you say, he is a musician, but when he gets the Yamaha DX7, which at the time was like, in the 80s, a top of the range keyboard, a
Oh,
great thing
absolutely.
to get someone. But he is
Totally.
just looking down at that going, "Oh, Billy, it's
Yeah,
great. It's got the strings, it's got the flute."
When he lingers on that string chord and it just goes like that, like that. I used to have a keyboard that did that. I was like, did I have that keyboard? And literally, it's like it's the most artificial sounding thing. And then do you notice for the rest of the film, they just play the piano like the normal piano? And you're just like, it's still sitting there for a while, like sort of like, very nice product placement right in the front of the screen. Yes, it's a Yamaha, but obviously then the rest of the songs are sort of played like nicely on the piano. So yeah, I think that was very odd. And I noticed with his accent, he
Yeah,
was really doing that sort of "I want to talk to you," like it was a real New York kind of
yeah,
what I would probably try and attempt a New York accent with someone said, which would not pass. And I think one thing is British actors have got so much better at their American accents, and now it wouldn't be unusual at all to see
no,
a British actor doing that. But I think he just didn't quite. His accent coach didn't quite do the job there for me. Yeah, it
yeah.
was a bit odd in the accent. So I think that takes you out of it a little bit. And yeah, casting wise, him and Mariah together, not good. Mismatch.
It's yeah, an odd couple. I don't know if anyone could. I should point out that I have seen Mariah Carey like acting things where I thought she was legitimately good. I thought her little
Really
appearance in Precious is, yeah, quite
fantastic.
good. Yeah, but she is perhaps because of her personal circumstances and her problems, she's not connecting with anyone else on the screen here. Really,
No, and that's what I mean. I think that's what I was going to say. I don't think her acting is without merit. I think there are flashes of a deeper sort of which we've
mm,
seen since, which is great.
yeah, yeah,
I think actually it works better when she's completely stripped of the glamour.
mm,
So I read a review somewhere, pardon my French, that was saying like glitter is a fantastic vehicle for her tits, for her breasts, because they're just here like rocks at all, constantly, And I mean,
yeah,
everything she wears is just little, and she's made up. I don't think there's a single point in the film where she hasn't got a full face of makeup. The face is big,
yes,
the hair is done. And I think that fine. We've seen this before, but at the same time, I think when she's stripped back, like she is in Precious, and I can't think of it. I mean, she's done other things as well. She's acted in other roles since. She's much more real, and she
yeah.
feels much more in touch with what she's doing. So I saw those little flashes. I think the moments where she was sort of being put upon, either
Mm,
by Dan or by the other fella, or anybody really in the film who's sort of shouting at her, or sort of she sort of emotes a bit better there than the bits where she is meant to be happy or joyous. It didn't seem fun to be Billie, Frank.
no, not at all.
He pointed that film.
Like, even by the standards of Star is Born model pop movies, which are usually fairly melodramatic and come to a
Yeah,
fairly miserable end, there's got
yeah,
to be something on the upwards slant.
yeah. There was just she sort of everything was seemed like it was just. I think, and this is part of her being like dolled up to the nines, but also out
Yeah.
of it a bit sort of staring at everybody, a bit sort of like, okay, it
Mm.
was all very. She just was sort of whisked along. She didn't need to really do anything except for open her mouth
Yeah.
and sing at times. But I mean, also it just was like, why are you doing? Why are you putting yourself through this? That scene in the limo when Dice starts shouting at her friends,
Yeah.
who, by the way, are completely not in the 80s. I mean, I don't know what they were. I mean, Debrat is like full on, like late 90s. She is like not even pretending
You
to be in the
can't
80s.
make Debrat look like she belongs to any other decade. It's just not
It was
possible.
just like these girls. I mean, I was expecting them to like start talking on the phones because it was just like,
Yeah.
this is not, these girls are not in the 1980s. But yeah, it was like, yeah, I think she sort of there was a bit there where like I thought, oh, she's doing quite well at telling him this is quite realistic. I feel like he's being an arsehole, and she's sort of going, stop it, stop it. But then it all that you lose it again whenever she's just sort of like sitting going, okay, yeah. And she doesn't
Yeah.
know out of the cab, and the friends are going, come on with us, and she's like going, okay. It's all very just let things wash over her a lot,
Yeah. Yeah,
and that
totally.
explains, I think, why we don't really get in delve those depths of emotion, highs and lows.
Talking about her friends, one of the things that fascinates me about this film is that her friends can like teleport or something, that every time they decide to do something, it happens immediately in the next cut.
Yeah. Well, there's usually like a little like cut, you know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
they're doing it. You know what I mean? Or a pan of New York, and then they're doing it.
Yes.
You know, we can talk about it again with the editing. Let's talk about the editing in a minute because I think it deserves its own section. But
Yeah,
yes,
totally. Yeah.
the friends are, you know, complete and utter, you know, plot development people. They're only there to sort of stand there and go, ooh, good for you. I
Yeah.
mean, it was funny because when they started, but she was a little girl
Mm.
and she had her cat in a children's home. I don't think that would have happened. And the friends, you know, the girls are like, there's a new girl, and they look like they're going to start bullying her. There's
Yeah.
very much like, we are going to make your life hell for the next 6 years. No, they become best friends. And
Yeah.
that was, you know, and then they're just there to like be crapper than her
I guess.
and
Yeah.
have an apartment that she can go to. And I guess look after the cat. Because
Yeah.
honestly, when I tell you the joy I felt in my heart when I saw the cat was still with us, you know, like whatever it was, 20 years later, um, I was very happy with to see that cat again because I thought, you know, I did think that the cat symbolizes a lot of Billie's emotional grounding, and we hadn't seen it for a while. And I thought, if that cat has died, she's had to cope with her mother leaving her and the cat dying, and you know all this stuff. You know, it's
Mm.
difficult, but the cat was there, and I
That's
believe that cat's still alive.
yeah, in our hearts, if nothing else.
Oh no, it's still there. It's still with us. It's
Well,
Mariah's cat.
I so that's an interesting thing about this because part of the template for this kind of pop movie usually involves the star being alienated from the people who were there from her when she was sort of before she was famous. But
Yeah,
all of the loss Billie has in her personal life happens like before she's even considered becoming a pop star. It happens in her
yeah.
early childhood. Big shout out to Isabel Gomez as a young Billie, by the way, who's fantastic.
Yes, it was
Well,
very
best
good.
performance in the whole film, I think. But you expect that those friends are going to be there so she can like have a screaming row with them
Mm,
or leave them behind. You expect that cat is going to be there, you know,
mm.
for something similar. And
Yeah,
this never really happens. Billy actually does a pretty good job of holding on to the people and the things that she loved
and
before she.
keeping them with her, keeping
Yeah,
them with her.
yeah,
You know, putting them. I mean, obviously they get kicked out of the video, but I'd kick them out of the video. They're just ridiculous at the back, you know.
yeah,
But at the same time, like you know, they're sort of like okay, and
yeah,
even Dice, who's horrible to them, you know,
yeah,
seems to be quite friendly. You know, he smooths it out whenever they get kicked out of the video. They're okay with it, and you know, certainly, yeah, you're right. It feels like possibly there was like a cut scene, or there
mm,
should have been a scene where she tries to connect with him again, and they tell her to go, you know, f off, and
yeah,
that's what we're missing there. And you know, I think that they could have wrapped up a storyline with the cat there by going, and we're keeping the cat. You know what I mean? That there you go.
yeah,
There's the cat. I'm only really concerned about the cat. But yeah, they definitely could have. I think that could have been an insert. You know, like it could have been filmed because Max Beasley said, I read a quote from him saying that, you know, there was quite a lot of emotional stuff and that Mariah had acted her socks off,
I read
but
that too. Yeah,
they cut it to hell, cut it to hell.
yeah,
And you can
yeah,
tell that it's been hacked,
mm,
for want of a better word. Um, and I don't have any reason to believe that he's not telling the truth.
yeah. No, I believe him completely.
I think that you know people say that, but I think you know I don't think he would have because other people owned up to it being a stinker, you know, and I think he sort of was like it is a stinker, but you know there
It
was
could have
stuff in there
been.
that didn't make it. It
Yeah,
could have been better, you know,
yeah,
and that must be frustrating as a as an actor, especially someone like Mariah who probably was trying to prove
mm,
herself. If she
yeah.
really did plumb the emotional depths, and then it just focused on her tits for you know 5 10 minutes instead in a scene that she was like, I wasn't even trying in this scene. For some reason, it's in. Why on earth did they use this? You know, instead of that. But I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, I think this film has a very complex relationship with Mariah Carey's breasts. One that if it were a person, you would ask it to maybe go to therapy rather than dumping all of this on us.
Some people would disagree with you, I'm sure, but yeah, I can see what you mean. They are a complex part of the plot, only hidden occasionally by cats. Uh, and I mean, it's a weird one because, again, I think this is a symptom of the time.
Hmm.
Early 2000s was very, women were expected to wear very low cut jeans, and the shorter the better. And, in terms of breasts, it was like, let's see them, let's see them.
Yeah.
In this, and actually the Loverboy video, which I watched last night, obviously watch it every night, was the she's wearing even less. She's in a
Hmm.
really short pair of like really short shorts and a bandana around her chest.
Oh,
And
right,
so,
right.
yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
Mariah has, I mean, she's got a great, she looks absolutely beautiful, and it's like she's peak physical condition here. There is no denying that she looks fantastic. And
Oh,
so it's like,
yeah, absolutely.
you know,
But
and if she wants to show it off, fine. But they make a point in the film of saying about how she shouldn't show it off.
yes,
It's
yeah.
like,
They, if only they traced it that way, rather than having Dice look at her video and say, it looks great if you like Titsy the porn star,
tipsy.
which, you know, there are some bits of this movie where I thought the hate was overdetermined. I thought it was just a bland kind of bad rather than, oh my God, what an epic ego trip failure of all the crap it got on release. But when
Yeah,
you were hearing Max Beasley talk about the work of Titsy the porn star, I
yeah.
did think, all right, yeah, I kind of see what the Razzies were getting at here. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, to be fair, I mean, well done for remembering a line from the script, because I don't think I remember a single line. There was no stand. It's very much like a dull hum and Mariah walking in and out of scenes. It's,
Mm,
I think that, yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know what kind of lesson they were trying to give us.
mm,
She was sort of walking around New York in much this. I mean, obviously she's in a bikini and whatever in that video scene when she's really sort of all on show with like a small piece of cloth
yes.
covering, and Debrat and the other friend just completely covered in like no, not showing anything, and she was just absolutely out. But yeah, the director in that scene is so odd as well.
Yeah.
I remember that line: "Is she black? Is she white?
You
Who
don't care?
knows?"
She's
We
exotic.
She's exotic. And
Yeah.
then also just going, sex sells. So she said, so get her to look sexy. Very stereotypical French director there, with his boys painted up with fire on their bodies.
Yes.
I don't think they're trying necessarily to say anything other than you don't have to show it off to be successful, but it helps.
Yeah.
That's generally what it is. And
You don't
Dice
have to
having
be Titsy the porn star to
don't have
work
to be titsy
here,
porn
but
star,
it
but
helps.
adjacent is fine. It's like, and Dice obviously, I'd be really interested in the Dice backstory, which we get none of. None.
No.
It's not, there's a picture of him as a child, and that's it. And to be fair, it's like I'd really be interested to know who hurt him in the past. Even if they'd
Yeah.
like hinted towards a relationship that he had that had gone wrong. They did that a lot with her and her mother.
Mm,
And my favorite bit, sorry, I have to say this, is the bit when she's like, so, that song that she writes about her mother, which sort
yeah.
of plays intermittently over. But especially when there's bits where like she's facing something hard, we get a little refrain just going, she's kind of fragile. She never got the closure that she needed. There's just this sort of line, which is so on the nose about like both Mariah, and she's written about her mother, but it's like very much about her. And it's
Not
like you just think,
terribly 80s in its phrasing either, is it?
absolutely not closure.
No.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of very like you're going, here we go, an emotional moment. Okay, that's fine. Let's get
Yeah.
ready for this. Um, yeah, but I mean, I think Dice's backstory to me would have been more. It would have been quite interesting. I would have liked to have seen a hint at some kind of someone's hurt me in the past. Make it Padmalachki. Make it her. Make it her character. Has used to go out with him,
Yeah.
dumped him for the producer, and now he's hurt. And that's why he gets a bit like, well, that's what she was like. There you
Yeah.
go. That instantly given him a bit of background there, and explains his sort of weird anger issues, and cover yourself up, and a little bit of that,
Yes.
because that all
Yeah.
came from. He was wandering around at one point with like a jacket and no top on, and
Yeah.
so you're just like going, "Come on!" And he never had a top on much anyway.
I
I
think
saw a lot of his nipple.
having him be Padma Lakshmi's ex would make so much sense of all of his anger, because I imagine Salman Rushdie feels like he fumbled the bag pretty spectacularly there as well.
He joined the club, Max Beasley and Salman Rushdie. I mean, it's a strange mix, but it could work. I think that would have, but that would have explained, I think, a little bit about the weird protectionism that he has over her.
Yes.
Because sometimes he's downright just going, "No, you can't have fun. Let's leave." He pulls her
Yeah,
away
yeah,
from interviews, and like that are not in any way, uh, you know, kind of bad for her career. It's like he's sort of. I mean, then this is A Star Is Born again, right? So he's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
she's on the rise. But he's not known as a singer. They're not in the same. They're in the music industry, but he's a producer and a DJ.
yeah,
And why doesn't he just go and work with someone else while she works with someone else? It's very.
yeah.
Maybe I'm applying. Nowadays, Jay-Z and Beyonce came to mind a few times when I was thinking about this, but I was thinking Jay-Z would never act like that to Beyonce if she wanted to go work with someone.
Yeah, no, nah. Yeah, he's too scared. He's too scared of his
Yeah,
sister.
he's too scared of Beyonce. Exactly, terrified of them all, of the whole clan.
Yeah, I think just a few sort of random observations before we close up. We briefly mentioned her publicist. I love how her new publicist, Kelly, constantly introduces herself as Kelly, the new publicist, like Bobby Fleckman from This Is Spinal Tap.
She's very keen to do her job the best way she possibly can.
Oh,
I mean, I think she
definitely.
gets it. He gets it.
Yeah,
She's sort
yeah,
of in a film where she's like playing a neurotic 80s publicist who's like, "We are, come on,
yeah,
let's ride this wave of success." She's in a different film though, like a completely different film. And I
yeah,
think a couple of
absolutely.
times Mariah's just looking at her like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And her little like assistant is just like amazing. It's a funny. That's a funny role, I think, and
Yeah.
she did quite well. She looked a bit evil at this. Maybe I've
Mm.
seen that character, but maybe I've seen that actress in a role where she's a bit evil before. But I can't. I have to dig it up. But yeah, I thought, oh, is she going to be? Is she going to be bad for Billie? But she's not. She's
No,
basically
not
just
at
trying to
all.
make her a success, and
Yeah.
Billie's fine with it. And there's a scene where they like are quite friendly, and she's there at the end. So
It's
I like
it's
to think
another
they
of
they went
those
on to have a
things.
lovely career together.
Yeah, it's another of those things in the film, like The Friends, where you sort of see it and you think, ah, they're setting this up for a big melodramatic sort of plot twist, and it
Yeah.
would be one thing if they subverted that. I would be fine if they subverted that, but nothing happens with it, nothing at
No.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, she remains very much a sort of background character, sort of
Mm.
squawking away,
Yes.
and not really doing much except for obviously getting Billie a gig at Madison Square Gardens after one single.
Which, no wonder there's no friction between them.
She's the best in the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I thought she was great. The system was great. I thought this sort of the record company didn't even. I mean, they wanted her to work with another producer who was this sort of hunky other
Mm.
singer, um, and that went nowhere. I was convinced that
Yeah.
they would kiss or something. No, didn't. But
Yeah.
that was also. I mean, I think you need that kind of thing. There needed to be a little bit more of dramatic.
Yeah.
Billie could have not necessarily cheated on Dice, but sort of maybe had a brief affair with this guy and then gone, "Oh no, that's not what I want," or something. Give us something to grab onto here, because otherwise we're just sort of much like Mariah, just washing. It's all washing over us.
Yeah, the
Billie
the
and somebody.
last act of the film really feels like a lot of the air's gone out of it, really, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Even though Terrence Howard comes back in, even though there's this very dramatic ending, it does feel like it's treading water before that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree, and I think that it loses its pacing completely.
Mm.
Once she's got the success, it's just like, oh, okay, well, now we're done. And
Yeah.
she was always gonna do that song at the end. It was a bit of a shock, the ending, spoiler alert,
Yeah.
when he gets shot and
Yeah.
dies on the street alone.
Yeah, that
You
that's again, because we've got no backstory for him, we have no suspicion that he's the sort of guy who might have run in circles where you could get drive-by'd
I
at some
know.
point. Yeah,
It's
bizarre.
and also I don't know how much money they were making, but like, could he not have given Terrence Howard some money? I mean, it's like
Yeah,
you did agree this with him. I mean, ultimately, like, you didn't write it down, but it's a verbal agreement. I mean, you could give him like $1,000 just to keep him quiet. I mean, it was very odd.
yeah,
That whole sort of setup and payoff was odd.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, for him to then be shot and killed on the set of New York was very sad. But obviously she got over it quite quickly. I thought when they were all in their like stunned silence bit, I was like, oh, this is quite good. What's she gonna do when she gets on stage? I mean, I was hoping she was gonna sing Loverboy. I don't think it was very appropriate, but she sang the other song without a single break in her voice, which I was like,
Yes,
Billie Frank is a
yes.
professional singer. And yeah, she did that. I thought that was quite funny. Not a tear in her eye, not a break in her voice, just Madison Square Garden, baby. She did it.
Are there any other Mariah thoughts you have before we wrap up? Because that is obviously an area where you're the lamb. That's something I learned today.
I mean, I'm a new part of the Lamely, I think it is. Yeah. So I'm not a Mariah stan as such yet.
Mm, yeah.
But no, I think look, I think glitter symbolizes very much wilderness years for Mariah. I think even though she was everywhere, I think she
Mm,
really sort of had a lot to deal with herself. And hashtag justice for glitter. We got this far without talking about it. Album reached
of
number one in
course.
in 2000. What is it, 2018? I think it was.
Something like that. Yeah.
And that happens, and it happens with films like this. Glitters for me sits, with Crossroads a bit, but like Grease too, and these kind of films which are just so crucified when they come out, and then they sort of go a bit culty. I don't think Glitters quite reached the Grease too level yet, but it's on its way. But I mean, they get so culty then that obviously people sort of. I don't think there's anything new to see in it. To be fair, I don't think it's a particularly good film. I think it's a nostalgia movie, and I think
Yeah.
that people who watched it when they were young passionately enjoy it now. I didn't, so although I maybe did, but I don't really remember. But I think it's one of those, and I think Justice for Glitter um, is a nice, really cute uh, thing that happened for her
Yeah.
and allowed her to sort of go, yeah, I'm number one again in the album charts with Glitter. It was maybe the film was not that good, but maybe the songs from the album were. Although I didn't, and they're not for me. But Loverboy was good, but the rest of them, I don't like all the sad stuff. What is it? The record company said all that mushy stuff. Not really. Don't really want that mushy stuff or whatever they said to Dice.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, so I like that for her. I'm happy that happened for her because even though she does look a bit like she's sort of out of it during the film, sometimes I think she probably did put a lot of her heart and soul into it, and it's never nice for it to not be successful. And you know, she seems like a pretty positive person. I want good things for her. She's now the queen of Christmas, so I mean,
Of
she must have done something.
course. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the big generational shift in Christmas that I've noticed since my childhood when all of the adults when I was young used to say it's not Christmas until you've heard Slade, and nowadays it is
Yeah.
absolutely not Christmas until you've heard Mariah.
Well, I love the like. I mean, she plays into it so much as well. I think she's kind of a fun person. She plays into it. There's
Yeah.
all sorts of videos of her like in a block of ice, thawing out, and then like on December 1st, she sort of thaws out and starts singing the song. And I don't know. I wonder how she feels about being known for that song. Because she has got a very good back catalogue,
Mm.
and but I mean, I'm glad for her that she hasn't gone the way of the sort of Whitney way, or the ways where it ends
Of
up in
course.
tragedy.
Yeah.
And so if being the queen of Christmas and having occasional Justice for Glitter campaigns are the rest of her career, good for her. You know what I mean? I hope that she's happy.
Yeah.
And it's a watchable film, if only just for the sheer kind of weirdness of it, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and this kind of juxtaposition of Max Beasley and Mariah together still blows my mind.
So, David, just give people a quick rundown on where they can find you online.
Sure. I write for the Geek Show, so all my articles are up there. And I'm Instagram at DavidPatrick81. I am a lurker on Twitter. Don't look at me there, or X as
Same.
it's called, because none of us are going to be there for long. I don't
No.
think. But I am on Threads under the same one. So yeah, DavidPatrick81, pretty much everywhere.
I am Graham W Films on Instagram and on a very dead Twitter account. I can also be found, just search for Graham Williamson on Letterboxd, the actual good social media app. And yeah, as with David, I am a writer for the Geek Show. But we'll be back in a fortnight's time in that weird perineum between Christmas and New Year. And we'll
Nicely put.
and we'll see you then. Until next time, I've been Graham.
I've been David. Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.